welcome to Legally Speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. Today we are doing a very, very special subject on Legally Speaking. It is about the Law Minister Kiren Rijiju. He's completed a little over a year, and it is good time to go over his tenure. And it has been a very good tenure. A lot of appointments have happened, and that's all the more reason to discuss his tenure. We all know that he started off as a Minister of State in the Home Ministry, and now he's in the Law Ministry. Of course, there was that tenure in the Sports Ministry also. But when he came to law, there were a lot of hopes. And with these appointments happening smoothly, those hopes have turned to reality. I have two eminent guests joining me today. May I welcome Senior Advocate Amit Desai, who joins me from Bombay. Thank you so much for joining us on this really important topic. And also Ryan Karanjawala, Managing Partner of Karanjawala and Company, one of India's leading litigation law firms. Thank you so much for joining us on this show. At the outset, may I request that in the next 4 minutes, if Mr. Karanjawala can give us an introductory comment laying down that you have seen law ministers and law ministers over the years. Can you also share with us your experiences about the tenure of Union Law Minister Kiren Rijiju and also the earlier ones, if you could reflect on those times too?
So some of the earlier law ministers have been personal friends. Kiren Rijiju, I just know on a nodding acquaintance basis. But when I look at him, I see two things. I first see that Kiren Rijiju is an experiment that is succeeding. And secondly, I view him as an outreach. The reason why I'm saying this, Tarun, is because for the first time, we are experimenting with a situation where, and the question is, will a person who has not been in the active practice of law make a good law minister? There has always, over the years, been a bit of a debate on this issue because a lot of people feel that when dominant personalities become law ministers, when they shift from the bar all the way to the seat of the law minister, they carry with them several inbuilt prejudices. You know, very often you've sort of been on the other side of the judges in court. You've been on the other side of the judge when you appeared before him in court. So sometimes imperceptibly, you carry with you a certain prejudice. There are judges you like, there are judges you don't like. And these prejudices or these thought processes can sometimes affect your judgment. And the judges also perhaps feel a certain sense of, oh, well, you know, he's not being fair to us, or he was one of us, but he's not doing sufficiently enough. Rijiju, for the first time, is a person, and this is important also, Tarun, in the context of who are the people who have been law ministers in the past. Just let's go over it in a very nutshell kind of way to just give you an example. How dominant have they been in their fields? So first of all, we had right in the beginning, Ashok Sen, who was the law minister from 57 to 66 in Nehru's cabinet, and then from 84 to 87 in Rajiv Gandhi's cabinet. In fact, Ashok Sen was such a dominant law minister that he had actually floated the idea that the post of the Attorney General and the law minister should be a common one. Nehru didn't agree, so it didn't happen. But that's how dominant he was. And he was, Amit will tell you, and anybody who practiced in that era will tell you, that he was one of the most outstanding and one of the busiest counsels of his time. Then you had another very towering personality. I'm not giving it in chronological order, but I'm just telling you, Ram Jethmalani, India's greatest lawyer in criminal law. But a man, as Amit, who has worked with him closely, will tell you, a man with a lot of inbuilt opinions, a lot of, very studied views. And that certainly affected his tenure as a law minister. Again, Arun Jaitley, a person who practiced actively throughout his career before he became a minister, and in fact had a long practice because he didn't become a minister early in his legal career. He joined the bar somewhere in 78, and he became a minister only in 99, 20 years after his legal career had been going on. Also, somebody like Subramanian Swamy, again a non-practicing lawyer, but for a short tenure under No, in fact, I don't even know whether Swami has a law degree. He probably does. But also a short tenure under Prime Minister Chandrasekhar. There was also on a milder version of a person, Dinesh Goswami, Arunabh Goswami's uncle, who was the law minister in VP Singh's time. Surprisingly, when we went through the list, Tarun, we found that even Chidambaram has been a law minister, but for a very short while. So the point is that when you have personalities of this kind as a law minister, are they often able to handle the judges or sort of get along easily with a judge? Or do they, when they interact with the judge, do they carry certain baggage with them? And do the judges themselves carry certain baggage vis-a-vis the law minister? Kiren Rijiju is the experiment that so far has been working. Because under him, what we find is that there have been a lot of smooth functioning insofar as the appointment of judges is concerned. Now, one of the fundamental things, of course, a law minister has to promulgate laws and look at 100 other things. But essentially, as far as the need of the hour is concerned, one of the fundamental things that the law minister has to do is to see that the engine of justice is on full throttle. If the courts are not at full strength, then they won't be able to dispense justice in the manner in which they should. And so far, we find that with his easy nature, his lack of baggage, he has been able to, in a sense, ensure that appointments get done at a far quicker rate than I think they have been done in the past. And I think that is why I said that at one level, he is an experiment that is looking as if it is succeeding. The second thing is, as I said, he's an outreach. After Dinesh Goswami, which was almost in the year 89, for the first time, I think you have from Eastern India, a person as a law minister. He's from Arunachal. And that is very important because it adds a lot of significance and a lot of heft to that part of the world. It makes them feel more relatable to the government in India. And I think that too is a very important facet of his law ministership. So I think at the moment, he gets very much a report card in the A category because he has achieved a fair amount and God willing will continue to do so.
Thanks for that opening comment where you explained and also juxtaposed against so many law ministers, eminent people who served in the past also. I'll go to senior advocate Amit Desai, who's one of the top lawyers of this country. And I think he entered the profession, if I'm not wrong, when people like Shanti Bhushan, Hansraj Khanna, P. Shiv Shankar, Ashok Sen, that era, I think you entered the field of law, these four law ministers.
I forgot Shanti Bhushan.
So from that point to today, you have seen so many law ministers in your career. You have grown to become one of the top counsels in the field. Keeping that in mind, could you give us your opening comment?
So I'll echo a little bit of what Ryan just said. And this is about the way we are seeing with this government, that the constant change in just about every dimension of governance that we see in different verticals, whether it's law, whether it's environment, whether it's just politics, with every area, you're seeing a constant churn and a change. And it is in this context that when you go back and see Kiren, and I don't know him and I've never met him, but obviously just read about him and heard about him from friends and colleagues and other judges, you see a fresh look and a fresh blood that is actually coming into this. It's part of that change that I see which is happening with this government in so many different spaces. So like Ryan rightly mentioned, he says if you look at it from independence till now, we've essentially had very dominant lawyers to occupy the position of law ministership. And I think in some ways, the concept was that somebody who understands the system, understands the people, understands the process, are probably ideal persona to occupy this position, because the function of the law ministry is essentially to ensure that the justice delivery system is working, it's well-oiled, and the so-called tension between the two branches, which is the establishment and the judiciary, is well maintained. And that is important as a very vital function of a democracy, to ensure that all these functions are well integrated and maintained and positioned. Now, obviously, all these years, the experiment has always been that have people from within the system to occupy this position. Take, for example, what you see in the arena of sports, where the courts today say that sports administration should be run by sports persons because they understand the business of sports, they understand the game of sports, they understand the dynamics of sports, and therefore they were the kind of right people. But this is a reverse, where what you're seeing is that while in the world of sports, you're seeing sports persons come in to take charge of the administration of the sports field. In the legal profession, we've had lawyers dominating politics and obviously the law ministry over the last 75 years. And Kiren is, I think, an excellent example of that change. And very often you need to break away from this kind of past history to bring about a fresh thought process, a fresh look, because otherwise everybody who's within the system understands the system and you probably find a lot of repetition. And I think somebody like him, who's young blood, because I think he's just about 50 years old, but of course looks much younger than his age in that sense. But, you know, he brings in a very different outlook. So he has law as a background because he studied law, but he then worked in different fields. So he has the ability to bring different perspectives to the administration of law. It's very often, you know, it's similar to what we, you know, when you look at it in company law, you have an independent director. What does an independent director do? He brings in his perspective to life into a board, which brings about, you know, a different context when you're running a business. Now, he is in that sense a kind of an independent person who has been brought into this position and brings in that kind of fresh outlook. So he doesn't have the baggage, as Ryan rightly said, of all the issues that Ryan articulated, and there are many more, I think, which he does. So he comes with that kind of, and what happens is, I think it therefore essentially ensures that the inherent biases that exist in minds of people who have been part of the process in the system, those biases don't exist. So he comes with that outlook. And therefore, the ability to maintain the balance between the institution and the government is also probably much easier because it's free of all those inherent differences or biases. It comes with our outlook. He has an open mind to addressing the issues of the institution as a whole. And it is there that I think, you know, when you see some of the activities and some of these actions in the last 1 year, I mean, you find possibly a change because when you talked about appointment of judges, and you find there's a sense that in this last 1 year, the process of appointments has been, you know, I think it's smoother. It's much smoother. And that's what's important, because that's what protects the institution of the judiciary. Because today, ultimately, to protect democracy, you need to ensure that this institution is well protected. And therefore, even the judges who are coming in, some of the recommendations that are coming through, some of the appointments that you're coming through, when you look at it, the judges who have been appointed in the Supreme Court or in the High Court, I mean, they're all exceptional people. So you have a sense of confidence that here is a person whose outlook to running that administration seems to be working in this context of the way this government is currently functioning. So, I mean, that's my first impressions of the man.
Thank you for that opening comment, Mr. Desai. I'll go to Senior Brian Karanjawala. Mr. Karanjawala, I want to know this from you, that when Kiren Rijiju became Law Minister, you know, there were a lot of conjectures who would have become. When Kiren Rijiju came, it came as a surprise. Not many people know that he would become. And we saw that during his tenure, then delivery happened, appointments happened. There was good news because this whole cycle of appointment of judges got going when we see. So if you reflect on that, do you think that this experiment has worked well? And as you said also earlier, that sometimes having a person who's not actively from the city of Bombay or Delhi also works. It's not that, you know, you need a man who's been in the Supreme Court all the time, all his life, or in Bombay. You can have people. And as I would like to point out that he did law and then ended up becoming a lawmaker. He became a parliamentarian. So though he was not a practicing lawyer, he's always been a lawmaker. And in that sense, from the vantage point, he's seen how the laws are, in a sense, written and then passed. Your comment on that?
So first, Tarun, a small correction.
Yeah.
When Kiren Rijiju became a law minister, there wasn't so much speculation as to who will be the law minister, because people had expected Ravi Shankar Prasad to continue.
Right.
His being removed came as a bit of a shock, and then suddenly Kiren Rijiju came in his place. Certainly, it took the whole system somewhat by surprise. That's the way I'll put it. It took the whole system somewhat by surprise. But very quickly, Kiren Rijiju's innate advantages came to the fore. I mean, I've met him only once or twice, and he's a very personable person. That's the first thing. And, there was a party at which he sort of burst into song and sang very well. So things like that. So he's a man, he's a gregarious man. He's a personable man. And also, one thing that one should not forget is very often in his career, he has been voted and acknowledged to be one of the best young parliamentarians, one of the best parliamentarians. So he was an effective parliamentarian. It wasn't as if he was a backbencher in that field. He's also been in sports. So, one of the things he did was he had a sports arbitration center inaugurated in Gujarat. So, he sort of brings his experience of other things. I think so far, at least, judging from what we have seen, and if it continues like this, people will look back on his career and say, this is an experiment that certainly worked. Because as Amit rightly pointed out, the most important part of the law minister is to see that the judges sort of participate in full strength. And, the advantages I've told you earlier is that Kiren Rijiju has this one advantage, that when he meets a judge for the first time, he's meeting him as a law minister to a judge for the first time. He hasn't had a situation where he has sort of clashed with him in court or clashed against him at the bar or any of that. Neither has he come with a lot of predilection that people come at. You see, when you're practicing in the bar, you're not only just appearing before the judge, but in the canteen and in the corridors, you're hearing a lot of things about the judge, not always complimentary. Now, sometimes that imperceptibly sort of reflects on your thought processes and things like that. Kiren Rijiju comes with a clean slate. And so far, that seems to have worked for him. Because there have been a lot of appointments, things have happened, and people also realize that, look, if he has been pulled out of the blue and put there, then he's not there because he's been an eminent lawyer. He's there because he has the trust and confidence of the government and the Prime Minister. And that sometimes facilitates your interaction with people across the spectrum.
That's well pointed out, because I would like to, he performed very well as the Minister of State for Home Affairs. He performed very well as a sports minister. So do you think for his administrative qualities, he was put in there?
Certainly. I'll give you another parallel of a completely different kind. Somebody from law who went into a different field. So when Kapil was first appointed as a minister, if I recollect correctly, his first appointment was science and technology. And obviously, as a lawyer, he's had no experience of that, at least in the studies and so on. But he performed extremely well because he brought the lawyer's ability to assimilate information and put it to best use. If you go back to the newspapers of that time, though he had a ministry as sort of distant or indistinct as science and technology, he made the most of it. So it is a fact that you can sort of cross-fertilize branches of administration and suddenly find that people are very successful in them.
Thanks for that comment. I'll go to Senior Advocate Amit Desai. So clearly this experiment has worked. Prime Minister Modi's choice as Law Minister, Mr. Kiren Rijiju, he saw the administrative skills in him. He saw him performing in two ministries, and then he got the Ministry of Law and Justice. So do you think this comes from this Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi's vision that, it is important to have people who have a task cut out and they go about to do it? It is about appointment of judges to get these things going, not people who are from the industry and, have their preconceived notions and biases. So good administrators to deliver. And haven't we seen across ministries, the foreign minister, other ministers, they all performed well. What do you think about it?
See, it's a very interesting thing which I've sort of been mulling over for the last few months. When you just see the trajectory of how the Prime Minister probably selects people in important positions, you always have a surprise element. You always have a surprise element. So, go back to the President of India. I mean, when you see the President of India, an outstanding personality, but at that point, a complete surprise to people.
Nobody could predict.
Right? Nobody had anticipated. You probably go by the names that you're always used to in the media and all that.
Yes.
But his ability to identify somebody who's, ideal for that position, has the right charisma, right, the character traits. But the most important thing, I think, is a sense of integrity. So you look at the vice president. I mean, even take recently the attorney general. So of course, our friend Mukul was the choice because he had the background. He's been the ex-attorney general. And when Mukul declined, I mean, you've got somebody who's a man of complete integrity, but somebody who again is new. He doesn't. So you found somebody who was competent, capable, man of integrity, but not outside of the sort of
known names
that you keep seeing. So when you see this, I go back to some years ago when the question that came up, even for example, the governor of the Reserve Bank. I mean, when Mr. Das was brought in after Raghuram Rajan, at that point of time, I mean, nobody had anticipated that he would actually come in. But he's done such an outstanding job, when you think about the way in which the selection process happens, what is happening is that there are people who are capable, competent, people of integrity, but people who do not have any kind of baggage, biases in relation to that particular field. And they come in because it's like the example that Ryan gave about somebody like Kapil, an outstanding person, a very, very competent lawyer, but his ability, because of his competence and integrity, was the ability to actually deal with a subject like science and technology. I mean, as lawyers, we obviously touch upon so many subjects in our work where we have the ability to assimilate, whether it's medicine, whether we're dealing with cases of medicine, whether you're dealing with excise, and you're dealing with manufacturing process, we have the ability. But to put it in place in a management process when you're running a ministry is very different. But you experiment with it. In that sense, when I see this, and you ask me this question that, you will see this kind of a trend and a trend line where you will find, these kind of people who are picked up, who we may not be used to, because as you rightly said, Delhi, Bombay, etc. But this country has got so many people, who are there who have not had the opportunity, and you're seeing the opportunities being given. So you're right. It doesn't have to be just
I'll take the same question to Mr. Karanjawala. So you also see this thread in the Prime Minister's choices where, unknown people, in a sense, who people were not conjecturing, have come and performed stupendously well.
Yes. So he has. Now, obviously, we are not privy to what goes on in his mind, but there are 2-3 things he looks at straight away. One is, obviously, the person must have unimpeachable integrity, because that's the gold standard. I mean, if in his mind you're not honest and you don't have integrity, then no matter how clever you are, no matter how resourceful you are, he doesn't think you're fit for the job, because he won't allow his government's image to be tarnished at all. So that's one. 2, he pulls out people from different walks of life. And in that, my sense is that he is guided to a large extent by his principal secretary also. Principal secretary sort of, I think, does the initial filtering process and sort of ensures that, when you appoint people to a high post, now the Prime Minister can't know everybody himself. Somebody has to take responsibility to say that this man in that post will fit the bill. Somebody who's had either studied that man or has had experience with that man. So I think in that he's aided by the principal secretary and a host of other people. He often likes to surprise people, not because I think he wants an element of surprise, because that really doesn't achieve anything, because he goes outside the conventional thinking process to see as to whether he can better what most other people consider to be the norm. That is, I think, one of the things that he looks at. The contours of his thought process is not confined as much as, say, mine, yours, and Amit's maybe. I mean, in the normal course, you would have looked and said, all right, who's the law minister? I'm the law minister. All right, who are the good top lawyers? Who are the ones who are on our side? Who are the ones who have appeared for us? Chalo, let's choose him. Who do I get along with? Chalo, let's choose him. That's not always the case here. So he thinks, in a sense, slightly outside the box. He acts also slightly outside the box. So definitely there is this whole element in him. Now, one advantage, when Amit was talking, I realized, and that brings us to an earlier debate that you had, Tarun, which is that should there be more lawyers in parliament? One advantage that the legal profession has over other professions, say a doctor, a scientist, a soldier, each of them performs within his own silo. Because a doctor, knowledge is going to just continuously be added in his own field. So if he's a heart specialist, he'll know more and more about how to handle your heart and so on and so forth. But a lawyer, because the nature of the work is such that he's not dealing with just the law, he's dealing with the lives of different kinds of people, the problems of different kinds of people, and he's dealing with areas which, the law deals with so many different kinds of areas that the lawyer's ability to assimilate information is much quicker, I feel, and much better than most people's. That's why, I can speak from personal knowledge. A friend of mine called Arun, he was no economist. He certainly hadn't studied economics in any kind of depth in Commerce College, and certainly not in law. But when he got the job, he learned very quickly on it by also having the ability to appoint the right people around him who could also help him, execute the job. So lawyers do have a slight inbuilt advantage that other people don't.
Thanks for that explanation and sharing your insights on this issue, and a very important issue indeed. It is, at Legally Speaking, it is important. We always talk about judges, but we have rarely spoken about law ministers. And I think this is one of the first times that we have done a show on the Law Minister of India. I think we make
Tarun, let me ask you a question. You've interacted with a lot of, Amit and I are on the show, but you have interacted with a lot of lawyers. You have interacted with a fair amount of judges because you sort of interact with them in the course of your day-to-day meetings and so on and so forth. What, according to you, is their impression of the law minister?
See, this time, very, very positive is what I have got. And they said that, the reason that you shared with us, because he came with no previous experiences with any of them. So both got off to a fresh start. And he said the principal reason the appointments process has got going is because there is a certain positivity in the interaction. So when we were researching for this show also, it is the kind of positivity that Mr. Kiren Rijiju has brought into the interactions, has what is set the ball rolling. And I think he must be lauded for that in that sense. I would like to thank Mr. Ryan Karanjawala, Managing Partner of Karanjawala and Company, Senior Advocate Amit Desai, who both spared time for this show on the Union Law Minister Kiren Rijiju. It is indeed a pleasure having both of you. And viewers, it's a pleasure. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so very much.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.